Hi there, and welcome to Incubate with me, Matt Ferrugia, following along as we make a software MVP in 60-ish days. And I guess we'll find out where that ish has come from in just a moment. So where are we? We're at day 58. Oh, that's really close to 60, isn't it? But all's going well. So this is a kind of check-in. This is possibly our last check-in before launch. So where are we? Well, we've changed the sort of focus of Incubate. Previously, it was something like the best place for product managers to make a software product. And now we're much more focused on this idea here. It's about making software scope changes stress-free. So whether that's for product managers or people who do product management type roles, really based on our job to be done research and figuring out what our USP should be. This is where we think there's some value here. This is what we're going to launch. We're going to test it in the market. We're going to see what the market thinks of this. So making software scope changes stress-free. And today in this video, what I want to talk about is I want to quickly go through those launch features, and I want to talk about a small thing I'm referring to as the heart transplant that has gone on, which accounts for the ish in our 60-ish days. But first of all, let's talk about the positives. Let's talk about the launch features. We do know what we will be launching. I want to show you what that is, give you a feel for it, and I'll take you through that. So let's get on. In terms of major high-level sort of scope, what we are delivering is two parts. So you can think of Incubate as a product to kind of manage the scope around the release. And in order to be able to do the managing, to reduce the stress that's caused from change, you obviously have to be able to plan and track that scope for a particular product. So there's really two high-level groupings of features. So one is all around planning, so kind of what are you going to build and which releases for the product. And then the second one is tracking, how are you getting on with that tracking. So we'll go through these in turn. I'll do this fairly quickly. We don't have to spend a lot of time on it. What I want to do is I want to encourage people to sign up and try it out for free. So that's probably the best advert that we can have. But let me just do it for the purposes of this video. I'll go through it quickly. Incubate as a product, planning and tracking, you log in and you see a kind of overview screen. That overview covers the products that you're tracking, kind of how far they're through. And we've also got this concept of recent approvals. And really approvals and the sign off of change is really the kind of core feature that we want people to be able to use. So let's dive into what the planning side looks like. So what do we mean by planning? It's basically getting the scope documented against releases. So, we know that for a software product, there's going to be high-level scope that gets defined, whether those are defined in terms of features or requirements, whether those requirements are captured in different formats we'll come on to. But fundamentally, getting that scope documented so that you can actually do the tracking, so that you can manage the process around it changing before it releases. That's the first part of this. So here's what we look like when we are putting a new product in. So one of the concepts that we wanted to deal with for managing a product was give people the choice of how they wanted to manage this. So we know that at the moment this sort of generic requirements tracking is the way this is normally done. So you get a title and you get a description. You can stick whatever you want into it. And we wanted to be a little bit more kind of hand-holding in this. So we wanted to offer people the chance to understand what it would look like to write requirements in terms of user stories or jobs to be done or just functional requirements, because people don't have to be using user stories or jobs to be done in order to manage the requirements for a software product. So as you onboard into the product, one of the things we're going to do is we're going to ask you what default template you want to use. You can obviously use others. We're going to define some user roles potentially that you can assign features against or requirements against. Obviously, epics are useful kind of grouping of features, so we have that capability at launch. And then there's this thing called Kanban statuses. So people will be pretty used to using Kanban boards to manage software projects. And for us, this is really about us when we're at the tracking stage. We want to quite a light touch. We don't want to be too heavyweight with this, but we effectively want to be like a better Trello than Trello. So we offer the ability to define the different stages you're going to track this through. So once you've done that stuff, it's not a particularly heavyweight setup. It guides you through, and then you can create the product and you can get into adding your requirements. So if you've chosen one of those default templates, you can obviously change it, but this is what it does. This is what I mean by holding your hand through it. So like as a user role, I want to do a particular action so that I get an expected outcome. And if you've chosen job story, you get to describe this in terms of situations, motivations, and expected outcomes. If you've chosen just functional requirements, then it's kind of like a more bare bones thing where you go through and you write up what the functional requirement is. And these are, this is not the most involved kind of UI in the world, except that we're trying to get to the bare, the kind of core value of documenting scope. And you'll see that later on, why we're sort of driving towards documenting scope as a kind of key idea, because we want to manage the change around that. But I mean, I'm pretty happy with this. I think this is as good, if not better, than managing it via many other tools. It's certainly more aligned with product management than just using Trello, which is a generic product. And we've also added in the ability to handle non-functional requirements, because I think that's an important part of scope when you're defining a software product. So you can add different requirements into your backlog, and that's all good. There'll be some sort of view of all the requirements. It's probably, you'll see there's a circle that says rework in this. This UI exists. We're probably going to change it. This was one of the first things that was ever designed. And the design language has evolved a little bit since then. So it's probably not going to look like this, something like this. Maybe it'll look like this at launch and then we'll change it quickly afterwards. But once you're into planning of releases, I mean, this is the basis of it. So you've got a bunch of requirements that exist in the backlog, and then you plan it into different versions. And what's quite interesting is that once a version is shipped, version 1 here you can see is shipped. If you want to change that requirement, we'll allow a requirement to change, to evolve through time. And it will kind of get cloned into an unreleased version, and then you'll change it from there. And you'll see why it becomes quite important for us to be able to capture all the scope that exists in the product. So in version 1.0.1, we might have just added 3 new bits of features, and we might have evolved an existing feature, but the product still has all the previous features in it. So if you wanted to get a snapshot of what the features in their entirety are of the product, with Incubate will allow you to do that. It's one of the things that I think is a weakness of some of the alternative. You've obviously got old school kind of waterfall requirements management tools on one end of the spectrum, and at the other end you've got things that are kind of agile software development tools. And the agile software development tools, they have a tendency to just throw everything away eventually. You create a bunch of tickets, they go through to done, and once they're in done, that's a black hole. They never come out again. So we don't want to do that. We want to be able to get an encapsulation through time of how scope and features build up for a product. So that's one of the things we're doing. Next, obviously, we're going to have a roadmap view so that you can plan how your releases are going to be released through time, a view of how the scope is assigned with them. I've marked that one as coming. I mean, this is designed, we could build it, but we're not going to hold the launch for this one. It can be added afterwards. It's not a sort of fundamental requirement to be able to get to the tracking process, which is what I want to move on to next. So it will be coming. It might actually come by the time you look at this, but we may launch without it, with a placeholder. So what's tracking all about? Well, that's the progress and the change up until the point the release is shipped. That's what we mean by tracking. So we're planning is kind of like what we're doing in the future, and tracking is what we're actually working on now. And the reason for us this becomes so important is tracking is really where the change process happens. I mean, most people are fairly relaxed, relatively relaxed about the change process that affects future releases. I mean, it obviously can affect budget and timescales. But the thing that really causes a lot of anxiety for product managers, or certainly people who are in the role between the development team and the business, is where change is happening and the goalposts are being moved while we're actually in the process of building a release. So that's what we're really focusing on here. This is what it looks like. Okay, so the first thing we have in tracking is a kind of a view of the Kanban board that we talked about earlier for this particular release. Now, this one is a mock-up design. It's a little weird because this release is shipped, and it's shipped without everything being done, with only one thing being done, which is kind of unlikely. But what you can imagine is, whilst it's underway, our scope, the product manager or the product management role, can move particular features in conjunction with communication with the dev team through to different stages. They don't have to have things like design required. I personally have found that managing the design process alongside the development team can make can make product development boards a bit messy. Some people like it, some people don't. So if they choose to kind of just keep it off here, they can do that. But otherwise, fundamentally, it's between, is it being defined, is it being worked on, or is it done? And once everything's done, that drives the status of whether the actual release is ready to go. So you get the idea with this. It's not very complicated. I think probably in the future, we may well add integrations with development tools like Jira, so that I don't think we'll automatically move things. I think that's probably not what the product manager wants to do. We may just make it that it's linked so that they can send one of these features over to Jira and then see the status of that in Jira or GitHub, so they can manage this. But this is a kind of higher level management tool. Again, if you go back to one of our earlier videos, one of the points that we did observed is that it's not super easy to do the management of business requirements inside a product development management tool, project management tool, because the devs don't really think in terms of business requirements. They think in terms of tasks and subtasks that get broken down. So I believe that this is the right split, but contact with users will tell us whether it is or not. And down the left-hand side, you can see one of our core things is to track this by status, to have the target ship date, and to have how many of these requirements or changes to requirements have been approved, how many haven't been approved, when the scope last changed. So you get a sense, this is the first time in this screen you get a sense where we're really bothered about scope changing here. You can go in, you can edit any of these requirements, they can all change. We're not running a change process at the moment. We're not proposing to run a change process around actually changing what these requirements are. We're just going to let you change them and whatever, and then we're going to give you a view of what has changed. And that's this view. So if anybody's familiar with development process and what's called branching and diffs and pull requests, this is very much that idea. So the idea is that we let you change whatever you want, and at any point in time you can say, can you show me the changes that happen between these two points in time? And you might choose to group them by user role or by epic. And this is where I mentioned this before. We might include the previous releases to get a full view of scope, or it might just be only show me the stuff that's in this release that's changed. But fundamentally, this is a view that allows you to look at what's happened to the history of the scope through time. And we also have the capability to generate effectively a diffs view of this, so that you can see what changes have been made. And this is the core USP value proposition right here. And this is, if you're going to manage the scope of a project, or the scope of a product rather, in a tool like this, what you don't want to be doing is shadow managing this scope in a Word document with change tracking that's getting communicated to external stakeholders. So our idea is you do the job of planning and tracking in this tool, and then you get that scope change view and lens onto this from within the tool itself. So we have the ability to export it as a PDF to share with somebody, but more importantly, you have the ability to request a sign-off. So we'll show you what that looks like. So the sign-off, you request a sign-off. Obviously, you specify who the reviewers are. Now, there's going to be reviewers who have to have, obviously they have to be on the platform, but we will find a way through account management, through user management. There's a different role type. It's basically a contributor role rather than an editor or an admin role. So we do want to make this as frictionless as possible to get people. Probably we'll be inviting people at this stage if they're not already on the platform, and we'll make that very easy to do. But you can just about see peeking out through there on the underneath that drop down here. It's actually obscured, but it says impact on release. So what we want to do when we request these sign-offs to communicate with stakeholders, we want to say, look, this is the impact it's going to have on the release date, and this is the cost impact and some details around it. Now, for us, this is the fundamental thing we're trying to communicate. Scope has changed between 24th of July and the 1st of August for whatever reason. That scope has an impact on our release. We want to communicate that to you, and we want you to sign off and say we're happy with it, right? That process definitely happens just now. It happens in email, it happens in Word documents, it happens in PowerPoint. We want to pull it into the tool. We think that's going to be very viable to have that in one place. So essentially that's our core value proposition. So when you log in, you can see what's outstanding in terms of approvals for the product. If you get an approval request and you come to the product, this is what you'll see. You'll say it'll be, here's an overview of what you're being asked to approve. You'll be able to see what the impact on the release is. You'll be able to see the changes that were made, and then you'll approve it. And once we've got the required approvals, that will be deemed to be approved scope change, and we can move on. And the great hope is that by bringing this process to the front and center, it's going to allow the product managers to feel much less stress around the change process for scope. So that was a kind of whistle-stop tour. I didn't want to take too long about it. I've really blasted through this. The one other thing I want to talk about as to why it's 60-ish days and not 60 days to MVP is the heart transplant. So you can read from this that we've had something quite fundamental at the heart of what we're building has had to change. And if you go back in time, this quote, I'd say there's probably a 50-50 chance that by the time we launch this MVP, we will have moved away from Git. That was me on day 3. And would anybody like to guess what's happened? We've moved away from Git as our underlying persistence mechanism. And the main reason was, I don't want to get into technical details because it's not really for a technical audience, but the main reason was that we thought we'd have scalability issues with having the file system at the heart of this. So instead, we've swapped in with a pretty nice database persistence layer, which I'm not going to go into the details of, but it's quite a new one. It's based on the principles of having a very reliable and robust distributed store underneath. But the key thing is it gives us the history mechanism as a key feature of the database. And that's really one thing that we need to have. So by having history as a key mechanism for a database, it means that we're not writing that onto a database that doesn't want to do that. So it's all good. The only downside is that it's going to push out our ability to release by probably a week or so. We're still in the process of doing that transplant, so we need to get that finished. So what are we aiming for day 60 plus? So I'm imagining we're probably going to be launching as early as possible, as early as we can get away with, that we've effectively got the back end in place and it's not going to be chopping and changing underneath people as they potentially sign up. We need to finish that transplant. We need to wrap up the launch day UI. So a lot of the launch day UI has been pushed back because we've been doing that transplant work. And then we're going to launch. And that's essentially where we are. It's day 58. I think we'll probably end up running to day 65 or maybe day 70 before we get it launched. But what I hope is that the next time you see a post from us on the getincubate.com website, it will be because we've actually launched. Thanks very much for listening, and I'll hopefully see you at getincubate.com very, very soon.